Hi guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. I apologise in advance if you can hear all of the sounds going on outside because it's Sunday morning and of course there is a festival going on outside where they've got live bands and music and they're about to have a march happening and I need to film because I don't have any other time to film today. So I apologise if you can hear the background noise. We'll just have to go with it. It's a background soundtrack for today. This is a Books Beside My Bed video. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. I film one of these videos every week and it wraps up the last 7 days of reading because I do read quite a bit and if I left it to the end of the month, we'd be here forever. This is my reading week from the 10th to the 16th of March. I read 8 books this week, a total of 2,303 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 66 books. I am participating in middle grade March, so I'm going to talk about all of the middle grade books first, and then I will leave a timestamp on the screen if you want to skip forward to the more adult books, and they are more adult books, so I'm just separating them out. I do want to make one note of something that I watched this week, which was a video by Cassie from Miss Sassy Cassie, who I love. I love her channel. I think it's fantastic. But she had a wonderful video this week talking about young adult versus adult and the idea of new adult and this idea of how age of protagonists in the book can be helpful to know when you're doing reviews, because then it helps you understand if it is definitely a YA, if it is more of a new adult book, or if it is definitely an adult book, because I think the age of the protagonist doesn't always determine the readership of the book, but it does help to identify sort of some of the themes that might come through. So one of her ideas was to include the ages of protagonists in reviews, and I'm going to try and do that today because I actually really agree with that. And I talk about it a lot when I'm reading YA books, and I might say, and I have said in the past, that this book feels like it's written for the younger YA audience, or it feels like it's at the upper end of the YA audience, and that is just the tone and some of the behaviours of the main character and the themes that are going on. So I'm actually going to try and be a little bit more explicit. Try and hold me to that, guys, because I really want to, I want to give you guys as much information as I can about the books that I'm reading. The first book that I'm going to talk about this week is Song for a Whale by Lynn Kelly. This is a 2019 release from Piccadilly and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I read this for the Middle Grade March Challenge to read a book with a diverse character or with diversity in it. The main character Iris in this story is 12 years old and she is deaf. Iris has grown up in a family with her immediate family can hear, but her grandparents were both deaf. And at the beginning of this book, her grandfather has passed away and she had quite a close relationship with him. She attends a regular school and she's the only deaf student there, and this causes her some problems and she struggles with that. She's only 12 years old and she struggles with people either not being able to understand her. She does have an interpreter there for her, but also understanding that some people are putting in the effort as well to try, even though they may not necessarily be going about it the right way. So there's a whole lot of social issues that she's dealing with. And then in science class, she is introduced to the idea that there is this whale called Blue 55 who sings on a different frequency to the other whales. So Blue 55 can't actually communicate with the other whales. They ignore him because they don't understand. And she becomes really obsessed with this idea of finding a way to communicate with Blue 55, going to the lengths of creating a song that he might be able to hear and understand and trying to track this whale down. And it is an absolutely beautiful story. There were moments when I was just sitting there going, oh, it's so heartbreaking and beautiful. It highlights children who are different from their parents. Her relationship with her mother and her father are interesting because of the way that they expect her to interact with the world and and Iris's expectations of herself. She begins to develop a really strong, close bond with her grandmother. And the whole thing was just lovely. I adored it and I can't wait to read it to my class. I'm trying to find a way for them to pick this as our next class read because I really, really loved it. I read 400 Minutes of Danger and 500 Minutes of Danger, both by Jack Heath. I don't have the physical copy of 400 Minutes of Danger because I've already passed it on to someone at work. These were published in 2016 and 2017 respectively by Scholastic and I gave them both 4 out of 5 stars. These are collections of 10 short stories that are designed to be read very, very quickly, and each story takes place either in 40 minutes in 400 Minutes of Danger or 50 minutes in 500 Minutes of Danger. Hence the titles. It's quite interesting because you actually get the time counting down on the side. It's a bit like the TV series 24. I was listening to a podcast with the author where he was talking about that. That was a heavily inspired thing, but it's also designed to help keep the pace going of the stories. And each story features teens, both young and sort of mid-range teens, participating in some really high intensity, high adrenaline situations. And each book sort of has a common thread running through it, and eventually all the short stories do become connected, even though at first you don't know how they're connected, but eventually they do connect. They're super fast paced. I was just sitting there going, I'm just gonna keep reading and I'm gonna keep reading and I'm gonna keep reading because they were really, really fun. These were in my school library. I would say these ones are probably more middle grade than one of the other Jack Heath books I read this week, but they are written with teenage main characters, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. I know a lot of kids in my school in grade 4, 5, 6 who would really, really love these books because they are fast paced, high action, high intensity, and it will keep them turning pages. Likewise, I know some kids who are year 7, year 8 age who would also find them really appealing and maybe above that. So if you're a fan of Matthew Riley, then these books are worth picking up because they are like the younger version of Matthew Riley. And keeping with the Jack Heath books, I also borrowed The Cutout by Jack Heath from my school library. This was published in 2015 by Allen and Unwin, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is the first book in his Pharaoh Files series, and Pharaoh is in his teens. I can't remember exactly how old he is, but he's involved in a case of mistaken identity where the authorities believe that he is an internationally wanted spy. He is then recruited by a spy agency and sent on a mission to help retrieve an agent who is missing. He is trained in only a few hours, sent out there, and then quickly finds himself in situations that he cannot control, and he is very much in danger of getting hurt. The whole thing was really fast paced, really high action, high intensity, just like the 400 and 500 Minutes of Danger series. I really enjoyed it. This one I'll definitely be passing on to some of the other teachers in the school who have older kids, because I think this one is just probably slightly for a more slightly older audience than my kids, although there are some kids in my class who would really enjoy this, I know. Well worth checking out. I'm going to be looking for the sequel to this book as well. I think it's The Failsafe, maybe? I can't remember. I should have written that down, but I do want to read the follow-up book and find out what happens to Pharaoh. I also read Ice Wolves by Amy Kaufman. This is the first book in the Elementals series. It was published in 2018 by HarperCollins, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. This one was just alright. It just sort of dragged. It's a really big book. Our main character Anders is 12 years old, and he and his sister live on the streets in their village. Every year there is a ceremony that is held where they can test to see whether they have the ability to shift into ice wolves, which is a privilege. And then you can be trained at a special school and become guards and whatnot. Neither Anders or his sister ever really attempt this. They more go there to pickpocket all of the wealthy people who go to attend and watch. And then one fateful day, they actually find themselves having to take the test, and it has quite dire consequences. And his sister goes missing. He decides he's going to find and rescue her, and this causes no end of problems. Most middle grade fantasy I'm okay with. This one just felt super slow, and I don't know if I'll continue with the series, but it's Amy Kaufman, so I read it because, it's Amy Kaufman. But I'll also take this into school because I think there are a few kids who really like that fantasy element and who will really enjoy this. I also read The Librarian of Auschwitz by Antonio Iturbe. This I read for the middle grade March challenge to read a book based on historical events or true events. This was published in 2017 by Pan Mac, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This has also been translated from Spanish, I believe. Yes, and the translator is Lilith Zakulin Thwaites. This is a World War II historical fiction novel, and it tells the story of 14-year-old Dieter Kraus, who is the librarian of Auschwitz. She's being held in the family camp there, and she works in the makeshift school in Auschwitz, although they're not allowed to call it a school because they're not allowed to be learning. The adults there have found a way to make it a school and to keep these books hidden, and that becomes Dieter's job. She lends them out, she mends the books, and she makes sure that no one discovers that they have them. This is a really sort of harrowing look at World War II. It's one of those books where it's published as middle grade, but honestly, I would be really cautious about which kids within that age bracket I would give this book to. I mean, obviously I'm like that with any book, but this one in particular, because it reminds me of The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which I had a more emotional reaction to. Like, I bawled my eyes out in that book. This book, I wasn't crying so much as I was just constantly being shocked by the things that I read about, because it is very, very honest. And I know that the author spent some time with the real Dieter Kraus, and so this is based on those true events. So this is very dark, but it does still have hope in it, and Dieter's story was really, really very important for me to read. Okay, and now we come to the adult books. So as I mentioned last week, I did start reading Arctic Sun by Annabeth Elbert. This is a 2019 release from Carina Press. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It is the story of Griffin, who lives in Alaska and helps his family business by flying cargo planes. He is a recovering alcoholic, and one day he's asked to help out the family business in a different way and actually lead a tour group around Alaska for a photography trip. There he meets River, who is a former model turned author, and River himself is recovering from an eating disorder, and the two do not get along at first, but then they develop a friendship and then a relationship, and it is about how they negotiate all of the things in their past that have made them who they are and have made them very guarded people in their relationships with others, and how do you negotiate all of that. This was a review copy from NetGalley. It is an adult LGBTQIA+ romance book. I enjoyed it. It's Annabeth Albert. I enjoy her writing style. I like the way she develops relationships between adults, and the only thing I can say is that some parts of it felt really long, like it dragged. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just it slowed down the reading process for me, where usually her books are quite fast-paced, but ultimately it was an enjoyable read, and I look forward to reading the rest of the books in the Frozen Hearts series. So this is the first book. And then finally I read Her Mad Hatter, which is a adult romance novella. It is a fairy tale retelling, obviously, of Alice in Wonderland. It was published in 2012. The edition that I have on my Kindle seems to be published by Kindle, so it might have been self-published then. And I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is the first book in the Kingdom series, and this series follows a whole bunch of either villains or male lead characters who had bad reputations in fairy tales and their fairy godmother's quest to find them the perfect mate. Obviously, it's a bit like Alice in Wonderland. It is short, it is smutty, and it was just, it was fun. And I like anything that has an Alice in Wonderland sort of retelling element, and I like anything to do with Mad Hatter. So it was a quick and easy read, and it was something sort of to break up all of the middle grade and fantasy and high intensity historical fiction sort of stuff that I was reading during the week. So those are the books that I read this week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you are planning to in the future. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.